With the possible exception of Devil Fruit, swords are just about the most powerful thing in all of One Piece, and today we're counting down the top 20 most powerful sword users, from those who follow the honorable code of the Swordsman to those who earned their spot by owning a sword. Starting at number 20 with Trafalgar D. Water Law. He's been a supernova, a warlord, but most importantly, one hell of a swordsman. Now, most fans underrate Law's actual swordsman skills because Law typically fights with his quite powerful Ope Ope no Mi Devil Fruit. A lot of the time, his sword is like a glorified scalpel within Law's operating room. But come on, let's give credit where credit is due. Law's sword is named Kikoku, and even though it hasn't played into the story majorly, it's actually a cursed blade. But more important than that, what sword feats actually let Law into the top 20? It's kind of unclear how much of this is his sword and how much is his Devil Fruit, but he did cut an entire mountain in half in Punk Hazard. And while you could theoretically chalk that up solely to his Devil Fruit, don't forget that he also cut Virgo in half as well. Virgo, whose full body armament haki made short work of Smoker and Sanji and should have been able to block both the effects of Law's Devil Fruit powers and his sword strike. That means that Law has enough haki behind his sword strikes to have serious cutting power, Devil Fruit or not. And at number 19 is a Yonko commander. In fact, he is one of the strongest Yonko commanders out there, King. Now, it might seem like King ranks a little bit low on this list, but that's because he's not a real swordsman. At least, he definitely doesn't follow the same honorable Bushido code that, for example, Zoro or Mihawk do. And so, instead of relying fully on his sword skills, King resorts to all types of dirty tricks. Instead of a traditional blade, he actually uses a sword that has several notches, similar to a sword breaker dagger. And instead of meeting a fellow swordsman heads on in an honorable duel, he uses this weapon instead to disarm his opponents and twist their swords right from their opponent's wrist. All is fair in love and war, I guess. But beneath his leather daddy exterior, King is actually secretly a member of the powerful Lunarian race whose superior speed and strength enhance his sword fighting abilities as well. His natural ability to harness fire powers doesn't hurt either here. Not only can his sword knock his opponent's sword away as well, it also coats it in literal flames. He is a pirate through and through at his core and will use any trick in the book to try and get the advantage over his opponents, because very much unlike Zoro, honor isn't really in his vocabulary. But next up at number 18 is the captain of the beautiful pirates and a member of the Grand Fleet, Cavendish. Now, King could probably totally stomp Cavendish in a one-on-one fight, I know, but remember that this is a ranking of sword skills and Cavendish has some serious finesse with his blades. In fact, just like Law, Cavendish also wields a cursed blade named Durandal, and as a named blade, Durandal belongs to the class of swords called the Meto. However, the grade of this sword specifically is still unknown. Durandal is actually a rapier, which is a quite rare weapon to see in One Piece, but it perfectly fits Cavendish's elegant and graceful fighting style. And very fitting for someone who uses a European fencing technique, Cavendish's attack names are actually based on pieces of European literature. There's Swan Lake, named after a Russian ballet, and Round Table, based on King Arthur and the Knights of the Round Table, among many others. However, what truly earns Cavendish a spot in the top 20 most powerful swordsmen is the cursed part of his sword. That's because when Cavendish falls unconscious, his body is occupied by the demonic entity called Hakuba, who cuts down his opponents with lightning-fast speed and insatiable bloodlust. In fact, it was thanks to his Hakuba form that he was actually able to take out almost an entire block of the Corrida Colosseum in an instant attack. That's not really confirmed that the Hakuba form comes from the sword technically, but I do mean it would be kind of weird if Cavendish just had a second unrelated curse in addition to his already cursed sword. However, as impressive as this captain of the Grand Fleet is, he can't quite keep up with a member of the actual Straw Hat crew. Coming in at number 17 is Brook. Now, before Brook ever gained his soul powers and became the Soul King, he was actually known as the Humming Swordsman. He is a very elegant fencing type similar to Cavendish and is able to use his sword with such finesse that he can actually play his violin with the blade, which for any musician out there is just not how strings work, I think, so it is very seriously impressive if you know anything about music. Now, Brook wields a type of blade called a Shikomizue, which actually means a prepared cane in Japanese. Basically meaning that a sword is hidden within a walking stick. And this actually isn't the last hidden cane sword on this list either. Now, after the time skip, once Brook gained a lot greater mastery over his devil fruit powers, he renamed his blade into Soul Solid because he can now imbue it with the powers of the underworld to actually freeze his opponents. One of his signature moves is the 3-pace hum-notch slash, which basically replicates an attack from classic samurai films in Japan, where he walks past an opponent and then sheathes his blade afterwards, and just as he closes it on the hilt, the opponent's wound suddenly erupts, having cut them without them even realizing it. And while to be fair, he doesn't quite stack up to the later swordsman on the top of this list, you can't really sleep on Brook, especially considering he's had feats such as actually being able to wound one of Big Mom's homies. And if you've worried that Laws or Brook's devil fruit might have changed the balance in this ranking a little bit, you definitely don't need to worry about that at all with number 16, Kinemon. That's because the power to magically conjure any outfit has really nothing to do with power or Kinemon's swordsmanship. And really, when I say Kinemon, I do have to give an honorable mention to all of the 9 red scabbards because samurai like Denjiro and Asura Doji have quite similar levels of power to Kinemon. But let's be real, this would be a pretty boring list if so many spots were occupied by those former retainers of Kozuki Oda, and so we're kind of batching them in together in one spot right here. Now, Kinemon and the others learned much of their skill in swordsmanship from the legendary Odin, with many of them replicating his signature two-sword style. However, it's Kinemon's other special technique that is actually what earns him a spot on this list. Kinemon's epithet is Foxfire Kinemon, because his katana technique allows him to both cut flames and also generate flames, giving him the badass fire sword of Zoro's wet dreams. He was even able to cut Kaido's blast breath in half. Sadly though, none of the 9 red scabbers could actually cut Kaido himself, which means that this is as high on the list as they can actually go. But up next at number 15 is Vista of the Flower Sword, a man with a mustache to rival Goldie Roger, and we don't really know too much about Vista outside of his skirmishes during Marineford. However, it's not just anybody who can serve as a division commander on Whitebeard's fleet. In fact, as the 5th division commander, I can only assume that his power level is on par with that of characters like Marco or Ace. Most importantly though, what we do actually know about Vista is that he was actually able to deflect a slash from Mihawk, and his strength as a swordsman was acknowledged by Mihawk as well. And if we know anything, it's that a high compliment from a character of Mihawk's caliber says a lot. However, right now we don't really know what Vista is up to after the Whitebeard Pirates got dissolved, so who knows if we'll ever get to see the swordsman in action once again. But next up, Charlotte Cracker is at number 14. As a Yonko commander, he has enough power to have a drawn-out battle with Gear 4th Luffy, which even Doflamingo wasn't able to manage. Now, Cracker uses a named blade called Pretzel because the Charlotte family really just goes all in with the food theme, as you might know. And while at first Cracker appeared to be a primarily defensive character, hiding behind, or I guess inside, his army of biscuit soldiers, when his true body and terrible hairstyle were finally revealed, he showed himself to be a fast and quite powerful attacker with a sword as well. However, ultimately his defensive stats were really lacking, which led him to being blasted into the troposphere by Luffy's Gear 4th Tankman form. And for number 13, I'm going into pure speculation territory here because it's gonna be Garp's right-hand man, Bogart. Interestingly enough, over 1,100 chapters in, Oda still hasn't shown us what this man can actually do, but I do have to put some respect on Bogart's name because you don't just get to be the right-hand man of one of the strongest Marines of all times by being a mere pushover. This guy who rocks the 1940s detective look trained Kobe, Garp's successor for the Hero of the Marines title, in Swordsplay, and on top of that, this Humphrey Bogart lookalike pulled up with Garp to God Valley, where he was sharing a battlefield with the likes of Roger and the Rocks Pirates. And to be real, I don't think I can put him any higher until Oda finally shows us what he can actually do, but I just know that Bogart has got some serious swordsman skills in store for us at some point in the story. In the meantime though, above him at number 12 is S-Hawk, one of the Seraphim, Dr. Vegapunk's newest iteration of the Pacifista. And instead of being super soldiers that look like Kuma, the Seraphim are actually all recreations of all the former Shichibukai mixed with Lunarian DNA and sometimes even given synthetic devil fruit abilities as well. And that means that S-Hawk is a clone of Dracul Mihawk, the world's strongest swordsman. Not only that, but S-Hawk's Lunarian bloodline elements give him super durable skin and enhanced speed and power compared to a regular human. However, due to the clone's aging process, all of the Seraphim, including Mihawk, still have children bodies, and even though S-Hawk's sword was styled after Mihawk's blade Yoru, it's in no way a replacement for one of the 12 supreme great blades. Now we have seen that S-Hawk can literally cut mountains clean in half, but he's still got a lot of growing up to do before he can climb to the top of this list. Meaning that number 11 brings us to one of the all-time strongest characters in One Piece, period. Big Mom. And you may be asking yourself, Big Mom? A swordsman? Well yeah, she's got a sword, so she's technically got just as much of a right to be on this list as non-traditional swordsmen like King and Law, who also use swords but don't really follow a samurai or swordsman-like code of honor. And even still, Big Mom I think deserves a higher spot on this list for her sword alone because it's literally alive. Oh, also quick honorable mention to Spandam. He was way too weak to put on this list, but it's kind of a shame that his best boy Fangfried didn't make the cut. And even still, Big Mom's sword is way stronger than any elephant around because it's Napoleon, the living bicorn hat who can become a deadly sharp cutlass. Being a homie, it means that it can stab and slash independently of Big Mom, and it can also work in sync with Big Mom's other homies like Prometheus to become a flaming blade as well. I mean, sure, Big Mom might not have the same artful grace of Cavendish, but when you can one-shot 99% of the One Piece wars, you don't really need tact, you can just hack and slash your way to certain victory. However, one swordsman with incredibly skilled technique is the OG himself, Ryuma, coming in at number 10. And I should note that this is a One Piece top 20 list, not a Monsters top 20 list. For those who don't know, the Ryuma that appears in Oda's one-shot Monsters that he created before One Piece is actually the very same Ryuma that appears on Thriller Bark as a corpse later on. However, he's kind of hard to place anywhere on this list because the only Ryuma we actually see in One Piece is the weaker zombie version on Thriller Bark, not in his prime. And so in honor of his legendary status as a Wano samurai and national legend, he still earns the spot number 10 right in the middle because he might just be lower or higher up on this list, who really knows. And turns out that Shimotsuke Ryuma is actually Zoro's distant ancestor and the most famed swordsman in the entire history of Wano. For one, he wields Wano's national treasure Shusui, which is one of the 21 great swords and is also a black blade, which likely means that the Ryuma's haki was so powerful that it permanently enhanced the blade's strength and power. We also know that many hundreds of years ago when he was alive, he beheaded a powerful dragon that threatened Wano, making him a legendary figure for centuries. As for number 9, I have to go into even more uncertain territory as I'm going to have two characters sharing this spot together. That's because neither of these characters have actually demonstrated their powers in the series all out, but based on their positions and vibes alone, we can all but guarantee that they're top tier fighters. And they're actually two powerhouses of the Celestial Dragons, Saint Figaland Garling and Saint Ethan Baron Venus Juro. That's because for all that we know, both of these characters are actually much higher on this list, but until I see their sword skills, they're just going to have to settle for being in the top 10 at number 9 in terms of pure sword skill ability. Garling here is the supreme commander of the God's Knights, the law enforcement branch of Marijoa, who even have the authority to dish out justice and execute celestial dragons. On top of that, Figaland Garling was also the champion of God Valley, the world noble's sick manhunt of non-government affiliated people and slaves, which means that he also survived the God Valley incident with combatants like Rod, Roger and Rock's present as well. And on top of that, he's almost certainly Shanks' father or uncle or grandfather, and who knows. And since Shanks is another one of the series' all-time strongest characters and swordsman, he had to get it from somewhere. And there's also not that much known about Ethan Baron Venus Juro, but thanks to his and the other Gorosei's activities on Egghead Island, it's clear that all of the Gorosei are insanely powerful and probably all have mythical zones or devil forms, which I guess is separate from the sword skills. But more importantly, Nazjuro also wields a sword that looks suspiciously like one of the Kitetsu blades. In fact, it could be the legendary Shodai Kitetsu, a supreme great cursed blade, which was the strongest sword ever forged by Kotetsu, Wano's greatest swordsmith. And on top of that, the judo part of Nazjuro's name also kind of adds to the suspicion that this swordsman could have connections to Wano or being a samurai somehow. But now for number 8, it's time to finally come back to characters that we've seen a lot in action plenty of times. The Dark King Rayleigh was Roger's right-hand man and Luffy's mentor during the time skip. And even though he's a lot older now, Rayleigh can still go toe-to-toe with an admiral, like when he clashed against Kizaru during the Sabaody Archipelago arc, or even against someone like Blackbeard later on in the story. And his haki is easily strong enough that he made the Logia user draw blood, being able to cut through the intangibility of his Devil Fruit power as well. And let's be real, in his prime, Rayleigh would have been at the near top of this list, but as he stated, in his older age now, he probably wouldn't be quite a match for powerful combatants like Marshall D. Teach, aka Blackbeard. And still, his speed and strength make Silva's Rayleigh an unbelievably skilled swordsman, but alas, his era seems to have slowly come to an end now. Which means that at number 7, we finally have our second cane sword user on this list, Fujitora. Except while Brook uses his cane for vibes alone, Fujitora actually does use his cane for a functional purpose as well. Oh, wait a minute, does Brook use a cane because he doesn't have eyes? I'm not even setting up for any yo-ho-ho jokes here. I'm actually just curious now, does he need this for walking? That's a theory for another video, but right now it's all about Fujitora. You see, Fujitora, or Ishu if we want to use his real name, is based on the blind swordsman Zatoichi, a very famous character in Japan from samurai films and novels alike. This of course continues the trend of every marine admiral being based on a famous old-style Japanese actor, and even without his sense of sight, Fujitora's observation haki allows him to easily duel with the best of the best in One Piece. Oh, and on top of that, he also happens to have the power to use his gravity fruit to summon literal meteors to rain down on the battlefield, but that seems like almost an afterthought because his skills with a sword speak for themselves. However, number 6 on our list seems to never get mentioned in these discussions of the top swordsman in One Piece. It's kind of like he's invisible. Oh, actually, my bad. Actually, no. He's just literally invisible. Shiryu of the Rain is the former head jailer of Impel Down and currently the Titanic captain of Blackbeard's second ship. Now, as far as we know, there's not an actual confirmation of Blackbeard's ship being ranked by power level, as Kuzan is the 10th and there is no way that he's the weakest of the Blackbeard pirates. However, Shiryu being the second captain and being a sword wielder does seem to really set him up perfectly as an endgame boss for Zoro. And therefore, if Zoro is getting closer and closer to the title of world's strongest swordsman, then Shiryu must not be all that far away from that either, I think. Also, unlike the honorable Zoro, Shiryu is much more in line with the rest of his crew. He doesn't play by the rules and prefers to use whatever tricks or schemes necessary to get the upper hand over his opponent. Therefore, his ability to turn invisible is just the perfect match for him. He can sneak up on unsuspecting opponents and then just slice them up right before they ever know that he's ever been there. Which is of course the complete opposite of the first member of the top 5 strongest swordsmen, Roronoa Zoro. As he said to Mihawk, scars on the back are a swordsman's greatest shame, and he wouldn't disgrace his status as a warrior by attacking unwitting or unarmed opponents either. Zoro wants to truly be the world's greatest swordsman, and that means facing his opponents with honor in a contest of head-to-head strength and skill. His signature 3-sword style means that Zoro Zoro wields 3 different named blades. His first and oldest is the Wado Ichimonji, a great sword that he uses in honor of his childhood friend Kuina. The Sandai Kitetsu is one of the cursed blades made by the legendary swordsmith Kitetsu as well, and his most recent katana is Enma, which is a great black blade that once belonged to Kozuki Oden, the former shogun of Wano. As it turns out, both of Zoro's great blades were forged by Shimotsuke Kusaburo, Kuina's grandfather, and also a distant relative of Zoro himself. And recently, by tapping into his armament and even conqueror's haki, Zoro has managed crazy feats such as cutting through sheer steel, dicing up entire ships, and even scarring Kaido himself. However, none of his techniques is more deadly than his Ashura ability, which turns his 3-sword style into 9-sword style for an extremely powerful cutting attack. He's Luffy's right-hand man for a reason, and by the end of the series, he'll surely become the world's greatest swordsman and the #1 person on this list. But as I see it right now, to reach the pinnacle of sword users in the One Piece world, there are still 4 other swordsmen, past and present, that Zoro still needs to overcome. And number 4 is no big deal, you know, it's only the former shogun of Wano, Kozuki Oden. Oden was powerful enough to fight against Kaido and possibly would have even won if it wasn't for outside interference in the fight. He taught other masterful swordsmen on this list like Kinemon and Denjiro, but his power truly eclipsed their own. His legendary 2-sword style is insanely formidable, wielding both Enma, which is now possessed by Zoro, and the Ame no Habakiri, which has now been passed on to his own son Momonosuke. In fact, both of Oden's swords were great blades, of which only 21 exist in the entire world. And both of them were forged by master swordsmiths of Wano, with Ame no Habakiri being made by Oden's own father, Kozuki Sukiyaki, in order to cut through the heavens, and Enma being made by Shimotsuke Kozaburo to cut through the bottom of hell. And while it's kind of unclear if Oden ever actually cut through heaven or hell, he for sure did cut through Kaido. He could not, though, manage to cut the number 3 2 best swordsmen in One Piece, Whitebeard, and the king of the pirates, Goldie Roger. And I do know that Roger isn't known as a swordsman per se, but like so many other combatants on this list, the dude does use a sword every time. In fact, not just any sword, one of the 12 supreme great swords that have the status as the very strongest weapons in the world, and the name of that sword? Ace. Yeah, that's right, dear viewer, if you've never heard of that, Goldie Roger actually named his son after his sword. Classy. And you see, even though Oden was an insanely powerful master samurai, when he tried to block either Whitebeard's or Roger's divine departure attack, it sent him flying through the trees. Roger and Whitebeard's haki was so powerful that their blades wouldn't even touch the moment that they clashed, they just hung in mid-air, blocked by the powerful bursts of haki, as if they were 2 magnets repelling one another. And Roger did end up becoming the king of pirates for a reason, because he really had the strength, but also the sword skill to really back it up. But in a speculation that I think will make some of you rush to the comment section, I do think that his apprentice has actually surpassed him. Because that's right, Buggy the Clown is actually the number 2 swordsman in One Piece. I'm just kidding, of course it is red hair Shanks. And so far nothing is really known about Shanks' saber Griffin and whether it's a graded blade. However, it is easily strong enough to clash with his fellow Emperors of the Sea. As a Yonko and likely relative of Figureland Garling, the commander of the God's Knights, he has both the blood and the life experience to create one of the One Piece world's strongest warriors, if not the strongest. I mean, Shanks' sword skills are powerful enough to have defeated Eustace Kid with just 1 divine departure attack, using the same technique that his mentor Roger used to use as well. In fact, before Shanks lost his arm, he regularly dueled with Mihawk, which means that the arm Shanks lost was likely his dominant arm, and who knows if Mihawk even held that title at that point. It might just have been Shanks. And even still, losing an arm didn't seem to have affected his overall ability all too much, as he can still very easily clash blades with the likes of Whitebeard or block a Kainu's strong Magma Fist. But even if Shanks used to be even stronger with a sword, he can't quite match up to the world's greatest swordsman, at least in terms of pure swordsman skill, because at number 1, we do know it's the character that everyone saw coming, Dracul Hawkeye Mihawk. And I mean, let's be real, there's not that much argument to be made against against that pick when his title is literally the world's greatest swordsman. I mean, Mihawk is a man capable of being a literal warlord without even having a crew, just going for solo pleasure cruises on his raft and dicing up fleets or ships just to pass some time. Most of the time he's just able to defeat most strong opponents with little more than a little butter knife, but when he's actually serious, he uses one of the 12 supreme great blades, Yoru, a black blade permanently imbued with Mihawk's powerful will. He can use Yoru to send dangerous flying slashes across a battlefield and was once formidable enough to earn the nickname Marine Hunter. And it won't be until the end of the series that we'll actually see if Mihawk will be able to hang on to his title once Zoro challenges him to a final duel. And by the time that Zoro faces down his former mentor and his greatest challenge yet, will he even still have the same swords, or is he still due for more upgrades? I mean, it's kind of hard to imagine a sword that would be able to beat Enma, which literally sucked all life out of his arm the first time that he wielded it, and that katana is pretty tiny compared to Mihawk's massive black blade Yoru. And so I think it makes sense that Zoro might need a sword that's even more broken than Enma. And luckily, almost 1,000 of you guys sent in possible swords and weapons that would absolutely break One Piece if they existed in the One Piece world, and I picked the 21 most insane of these right here, and honestly, any of these would be the perfect upgrade for Zoro when he finally faces down Mihawk for the title of world's greatest swordsman. Thanks so much for watching. If you had a great time watching this video, please press all these buttons down below. It does really help out the channel, even if it's annoying, and otherwise, I will hopefully see you in this next one. You should not miss out on this video.